Yeah, well, let's dig in. Hello, everybody. I'm David Cooks, and I tell you what, paralysis can take on many, many forms. It can be physical like mine, or it can be psychological.
You can do anything you put your mind to. What seems impossible can be done by you.
And what we try to do is feature stories that go from difficult places to fulfilling purpose.
It may knock you down, but don't let it stop you. Got so much to give, a lot of life to live. You must go from paralysis to purpose.
You're in for a treat today.
Yeah.
Know that it's okay to have times of reflection and it not be a situation where you think you're spiraling into depression somehow. It just gives you the permission to step fully into the power of who you are as a sovereign being here, having a human experience.
Paralysis to purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks, and thank you for joining us once again for this episode. Please do us a favor and make sure you share this with someone, give us a thumbs up, and of course, a great review is always welcome. I say this all the time, and today is no exception. I get to speak with some of the most intriguing and inspiring people on the planet. And today I'm really excited about our guest, Diamond Drip. She is an award-winning speaker, and her journey is amazing. She has a background in visual communications, business strategy, and she has a passion for personal growth. She also is interested in helping women break free from fear and self-doubt and step boldly into the power that they possess. She uses tools like human design and gene keys, and she encourages people to trust their intuition and embrace their own authenticity. So I think we're going to have a lot to talk about today. She reached out to me, believe it or not, after watching an episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast with Sherry Hall from way back in the day. And she was so intrigued by the podcast and thought, man, I wonder if you'd like to talk. And I was like, absolutely, yes, I will. So here we go. Welcome, Diamond.
Oh my gosh. Hi. It's so exciting to be here with you.
There's a lot of things we want to get to. We definitely want to talk to the audience a little bit about human design today. I want to just say this before we begin. All the people who know me know that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ and a solid believer. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about science and how science is used to help people identify some of their strengths and weaknesses and these types of things. And so don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. We'll probably ask some hard questions and get some hard answers and all those types of things along the way. But before we do that, Diamond, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into what you do and how you do it.
I grew up with a undiagnosed borderline personality disorder parent. How that showed up for me in my experience was a lot of control, a lot of short fuses, and those actually ended up getting me removed from her care when I was 14 due to child abuse and neglect. So I had to be put into the Child and Family Services ecosystem in DC, but that was a blessing because that brought my dad back into my life. That was another control mechanism that my mom had. She kind of kept him away. So it allowed me to bring back pieces of myself and really get to know that side of my family. Fast forward a little bit, I went with him junior and senior year before going into the Air Force for a little bit. And it was there that I learned what it meant to be good at something, but not have it be fulfilling. I was diagnosed around the same time that I was taken away from my mom's care with bipolar 2 disorder. The bipolar 1 is kind of what you think of normally with like mania, doing a bunch of things, really hot then really cold. But bipolar 2, there's a lot less out there about it, but essentially our lows are really low and we don't really get that high as people with bipolar 1 disorder. So it's kind of the short end of the stick.
Would that lead to depression then, having those types of lows?
Oh, yeah. I remember when I was on Reddit a few years ago, it was a bipolar 2 thread. And if you go through some of the threads, people are asking how can they trigger their because bipolar 1 has mania, bipolar 2 has hypomania, which is like less subtle. The wave is smaller. And so people are literally so depressed that they're like, when I have hypomania, I feel like I'm on top of the world. Like, how can I do this safely? That's how bad it is. And so due to my depression, I actually ended up early separating from the military. And that brought me back to civilian life. I like to say that was the phase of my life where external validation was 100% something, like it had been something all my life, like getting straight A's in school, getting into the things. But in adulthood now, this was one of the positions that I held was at a gym. And I rose through the ranks. I became general manager of a gym. And when the location shut down because corporate lost the lease, I lost my job. And I decided in that moment that I was tired of putting my financial future into the hands of people who I had never even seen or talked to. And so I decided to go into business for myself back in 2019. I was determined, especially when COVID hit, because I have a 7-year-old now, but back then she was little and she had a lot more needs. I started off with a product-based business, again, allowing me to grow and excel. And what I like to say, the blissful ignorance of my own self-worth, because when you have a product-based business, you know how much you get something for, you add the profit margin, and that's the price. And there's really no negotiating because you know what you paid for it. In August of 2022, I participated in a clinical trial that used psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms, to actually heal my depression. Pre-trial, I was very type A perfectionist, tightly wound, never-ending to-do list. It was bad. And what I like to say the trial gave me was self-compassion and self-grace and self-forgiveness. And it also showed me that I was burning out. By that point, I had been in business for a couple of years, and I was operating 2 businesses. I was still hanging on to the first business. I had started my second business because I was in school pursuing my degree, which is in visual communications. And then, as I mentioned, I had a little person. And I was like, this is insane. This is so much. Like, why am I doing so much? And so I started to really take stock of what mattered. And I realized that I needed to let my first business go. And I really needed to look at the things that were working, what I loved about being in business for myself, and see how I could bring those into a business that was actually, I now say in alignment, but I don't think I was saying alignment back then. I think maybe balance was what I was saying, probably.
Balance, fulfillment.
Yeah.
And I think those are all great words, by the way.
I appreciate that.
So let me ask you a couple of quick questions. The first thing you said that was striking to me was that it was a blessing when you ended up being removed from your mother's care.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the importance of seeing the good when you're in something like that? Sometimes we're looking for a blessing, and the blessing is in what you're in at the time. I know you talk to people about this. How do you help them to see that?
It's really a matter of a perspective shift. For me, back then, it was survival mode. It was like, okay, it was one of those situations where the goal when a child is removed from the home is always reunification. They always want to keep families together. And so they would have these meetings. My maternal aunt, my mom's sister, she would show up. She would be there. So there's like a mediator there in addition to the social workers and everything. And my mom would just not show up. At that point, it was really like, okay, well, mom's not showing up. This seems to be where I'm going to be. And I've always tried to look for the silver lining in things. And that was just a situation that was no different. Now I choose, not out of survival, I choose to see the good. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a lunch date and I got my wallet out of my car and then I locked my car and I put my keys in the home because we were taking somebody else's car. When we got back, I forgot that I didn't have my keys with me. And so the place that we went to was like a cafe. They closed at 4. They were already closed. I couldn't find my keys. And I started freaking out because I was definitely farther from home than I would have liked to be. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to have to call someone to pick me up? I have things to do tomorrow. Like, how am I going to get everything done? And I took a breath and I was like, how can this be a good thing? And I was like, let's look at the calendar. Let's see what you actually have to do. Most of it was virtual. So I was like, okay, you can go to the cafe at some point and get your keys back. Luckily, I found my keys, but it was a matter of taking a breath and just thinking about how I could see the good in it.
The choosing to see the good. That's really important because I tell people that, the Bible says to be thankful in all things. It doesn't say be thankful for everything. And so to find something to be thankful for in the midst of something that may not seem great it's a practice that you should really take on, because as bad as it is, it's not as bad as it could be. And I think sometimes that helps us to move forward. I want to talk about your clinical trial that you did, because I think it's important in this day and age where we're starting to understand the medicinal purposes of herbs and other things that really have been on earth forever. And we're starting to kind of uncover that they have healing powers and transformative powers, which God created them for that purpose. And since you've gone through that, the clinical process, how do you maintain that freedom? Is it an ongoing thing for you? Is it a continual battle, or none of the above?
I really appreciate that question. After the trial, I was good. In previous interviews, I talked about how I danced in the shower for the first time in my life. I talked about how I was going to pick up my daughter, and I had worked out that day, and I was driving. It was a beautiful sunny day. As I was driving, I was thinking about how grateful I was to be alive and how much, quite frankly, it would suck if I were to die somehow that day. And I remember that making me tear up because that had been a total juxtaposition of everything I had experienced before. I learned through the trial in the sessions leading up to it that I was having a lot of passive suicidal thoughts. I had moved on from active suicidal thoughts, but I was having a lot of passive ones and I didn't even realize it. And so to think for the first time, like it would suck to die today, that was huge. A couple weeks after the trial, I had what I thought was a relapse because I started feeling tired. I started feeling like low. And it was then that I realized the power of hormones in the female body, because what I was actually experiencing was PMS. And so even learning how to navigate my own cycles and realizing like, no, you didn't go back. It's not like, it's just a week where your hormones are doing some weird things, you don't have as much energy, and you can't just push through like you normally do. The trial gave me permission to really explore myself even more. And that's a rabbit hole that I revisited later in life, women's cycles and things like that.
You talked about an affirmation before. How important have you found that to be in the work that you do? I believe that everybody wants a pat on the back. I think everybody wants a thank you. Everybody wants to feel, like they're embraced or a part of a community. What have your research and your studies and the things that you do shown, and why is that, based on what you do, so important?
We live in a society that tells us that we are unworthy, that if we buy X, Y, and Z, if we do X, Y, and Z, then we'll have success, then we'll have happiness. And it's the one size fits all approach that people, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get into a good job, like all of it, get the house, have the kid, get like all of it. And then you retire and then you can live your life and be happy. And it's like, what? No. And so one of the things that I love most about the tools that I use in my business is that it gives you permission to be who you are at soul level. Perfect example. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. So I know that I operate life in this series of highs and lows. In human design, I have what's called emotional authority. And so we experience life through our feelings. It's not a bad thing. It just means when we're in that happy state, in that high state, enjoy it. Do what lights you up. Don't make decisions from that place because you should decide when you're in an emotionally neutral place, but enjoy it. And when you have these lows, know that it's okay. It's okay to have times of reflection and it not be a situation where you think you're spiraling into depression somehow. Little things like that. It just gives you the permission to step fully into the power of who you are as a sovereign being here, having a human experience.
Well, that's a lot that you.
I know, right?
But we're gonna try to peel back some of that now. Let's talk about science. We're going to talk specifically about human design. And let me just say this. I know a number of people who have degrees in astrology and astronomy and other sciences of the universe, I call it. And I personally believe that God created everything and he created it good. And so we can turn it evil and turn it into evil things, but it has good meaning. When you talk about human design, and we'll talk about my chart at some point and what that means, because I'm a one percenter, I found out. Oh,
Yes.
I knew I was a one percenter, but a lot of that hasn't fully manifested yet, but it will. So what's different with the tools you use than a personality and predictive test that you may take in the marketplace for a company or something like that?
That is an amazing question. So Myers-Briggs, DISC, Clifton Strengths, all of those, they're questionnaires that you take and it's at that snapshot. So it's after you've already been exposed to the trauma. It's after you've already deviated in a way. And one of the things about those tests is I've actually taken a DISC assessment. If I take a DISC assessment now, I know the results are going to be different, like for sure. The difference is that human design, it brings in two things. First of all, you don't need to answer a whole bunch of questions for human design. And that's one of the things that I love, even with other spiritual tests. Like if you've heard of Enneagrams, that test is 147 questions long. What I love about human design is the most important piece is knowing your time of birth. Many people know their birth date. Many people know where they were born, but the birth time is something that they'll either have to ask mom, or they'll have to look at their birth certificates. There are some people who apparently wherever they were born, they weren't recording times at that moment. So I do have this recertification tool that people can use and answer questions to help them figure out what time they were born so they can do their human design. But one of the things that I love is that your human design is an energetic blueprint of your energy, and it shows you how you can use your energy best for what you're here to do in this lifetime, your purpose here. And so while the planets shifting around and moving may activate certain gates for certain extended periods of time, like your chart stays your chart. And some of the science that goes into it is at your time of birth, there's like an imprint, like they call it in human design neutrinos from like the cosmos. And so that forms your personality side, your conscious side. And 88 days before, that's what forms your unconscious side, your design side. So it's set. Like I actually had someone reach out to me this morning and she was like, I was actually born early. I didn't make it to full term. I was only born at 7 months. And I was like, honey, like science said that you were supposed to be born at 9 months, but your soul knew that I have the gifts that I need right now and I'm ready. So it was one of those things. That's what's different about it is like, one, it's free. You just need those details in order to pull it versus the disc. And then you have to get a coach sometimes and help you. Like it's a whole thing.
So human design and astrology and some of these other things, are interrelated.
Mhm.
And I want to try to just make it as clear for our audience as possible without it getting spooky or anything like that. And also because chakra and other things are involved in part of the development or understanding of human design. There are those who would say that human design is potentially a gateway to the occult.
Mm.
How would you respond to someone who thinks, well, that's fine. I give them my name and when I was born in the city and the time, and then I get these things. The question becomes, what comes next? Give our audience some comfort level.
Yeah, for sure. I love that question. So, human design, it doesn't tell you anything about yourself that you don't already know. If something doesn't feel like it fits, you might have a detail or two wrong. And oftentimes it's like, oh, yeah, I entered AM instead of PM. And so, one of the things that I love is that as I go through readings with people and I'm like bringing out the details, I'm asking them questions, they know where they've been. It's just unfortunately due to conditioning, society, our family, our friends, it's often in the shadow side, the repressive or the reactive side. It's not in the gift of whatever it is. So, one of the things I say is that, you could go your whole life not knowing your human design. You'd make a lot of unaligned decisions because you're not following your strategy and authority for the work you're meant to do in this lifetime. But it's only a tool that helps.
The key word that you just said, it's a tool.
Hmm.
Because when you asked me to complete the human design application, it took like a minute. And when things began to come out, these were all things I already knew. And for me, it was more of a confirmation than a discovery. Some of that might be because I'm closer to 60 than I am 20. And I have a better understanding of who I am now than I did probably 10 years ago or 5 years
Yeah.
ago. So, how much is a person's evolving of understanding who they are? How does that impact what you do? As I'm thinking, I'm changing, but the core of who I am is staying the same.
Exactly.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. So I like to say human design is just a blueprint of the gifts that you were given in this lifetime or chose in this lifetime. One of the things that I had to sit with, because I look at my chart sometimes, and I'm talking to a reflector right now, so all of your chart is white, but I look at my chart sometimes and I look at the undefined like white areas and I'm like, why? The not self question that comes out of that is, do I think I have something to prove? But when I change my perspective and I look and I see it only needed these things. So all of the gifts that are defined, these are things that I need. If it's not defined in me, then I didn't need it to be successful. And when you don't have something defined, it doesn't mean that you don't have access to whatever that gift is. It just means that access is fluid. You
Mhm.
don't always have access to it.
When you say the word soul, because on your website it says soulpreneurs. Um, First of all, what do you mean when you say soul? And what is a soulpreneur?
We all know the term entrepreneur. When I was in the business coaching space, I happened upon the term solopreneur, which is someone who's doing everything themselves, pretty much. And oftentimes, people will do that until they get the foundation under them and they can expand. And so what leads those people, what drives those people is their mission, their soul, like their purpose. Like they feel like they have something to contribute to the world. And this is what they're here to do in this lifetime. So now that I'm more in the spiritual space than the business coaching space, I just thought that it fit because they are soulpreneurs. They put everything into their business. And to answer your second question, oftentimes it's said that we are a mind, we're a body, and we're a spirit. And so for me, the soul and spirit are synonymous. Like that, I am, that is who I'm talking about when we talk about the soul. Like, yes, we have our bodies and our minds will do some tricky stuff all the time.
Mhm.
But we, at the end of the day, can always choose to connect with our spirit.
You said I am, and that's such a powerful statement and in Christian thought, uh,
Mhm.
that is who God told Moses to tell the people, "Who are you? I am." And he lives in us, so the I amness that he gives us causes us to fulfill mission
Yes.
and purpose in all of those things. The test itself. So I want to get into the mechanics of it, and perhaps a little bit on the background, but people can research that on their own, because the outcome of the chart to me is what is significant in what you do. I filled out the form. You've read my chart,
Mhm.
and so when you contacted me back and we confirmed doing the podcast, you were like, "Oh my God, you're a reflector. You're a one percenter." And you were so hyped up and juiced up about it. We can go through some of my chart just so
Yeah.
you can see what are the categories, the 3 or 4 categories that you will get just from the basics without going any further, just from your chart itself.
The main thing that you're going to get is your energy type. So there are 4 energy types. There's the reflectors, there are manifestors, projectors, and then pretty much like 70% of the population is what we call a generator. So we're like the little energizer bunny. So you'll find your energy type. You'll understand what your inner authority is. So that's how you make your best, most aligned decisions. So a reflector's environment is super important for them because when you have definition in your chart, you have what we call an energetic buffer. So you kind of have a fixed and reliable way of how that energy comes in. When things are undefined as reflectors,
Mhm.
every single energy center is undefined. You don't have an energetic buffer. And so the energy that comes into that center becomes amplified in you. So the environment for reflectors is super important because if they're in a bad environment, they're
Mhm.
going to take that energy in and they're going to start feeling bad. And wherever they are is also going to feel bad. But if you take a reflector and you put them in a place where they're thriving and they're loving what they're doing, then everyone around them is going to feel the amplification of that energy. So they reflect back to us. They're supposed to reflect back to us how we're doing as a society, because in them, we can see, some of the pitfalls. A lot of reflectors are super wise, and you're no different. I saw your profile was a 1-3.
What does a 1-3 mean?
There are 6 lines in human design, and those lines form 12 different profiles. And so the 1-3 is just one of 12. So the 1 is how people see you outwardly, and the 1 specifically is the investigator, the researcher. So you and I actually share the 1. I'm a 5-1, you're a 1-3. And so we love going down rabbit holes of information. We love getting to the foundation of like the facts before we even take it to the world. And so the 3 is our underlying script of like how we interact with the world. And so the profile line 3 is the martyr. So they experience life through a lot of trial and error. So you, it's safe to say, are very wise because you have the book smarts of going down rabbit holes and getting to the foundation. And then you also have a lot of life experience of trial and error and things like figuring stuff out and gaining that sort of wisdom.
As you went further down, there were some other things I don't have in front of me, number 63 or 64, some other
Yeah.
things. Talk about a couple of those because I want again to give our audience an overview also of some of this.
I saw that your G center, it's really lit up. Like there's only two gates in there that aren't activated. And so what the G center in human design does, it's our sort of identity center. It's where we attract love, things that pull us into who we are. You can think of it like if we're on a train track, the G center is what pulls us forward and attracts things into our life. And so to see how defined you had like all of the activations in there, like I saw leadership in there, I saw the gate of the listener, and the gate of extremes, which is also like the wild heart. I'm actually learning, I learned through traditional human design that 15 is the gate of extremes, and that was very on the nose for me. But as I learned more about quantum human design, which pulls in more of the quantum physics aspect, um, it's like you march to the beat of your own drum. And through people observing you and witnessing you just kind of have these natural flows, it's like, okay, I could do that, or I could do, something similar. I also saw that you had the gate 40 activated, which is like the gate of friendship.
I love relationships. I value friendships. I think one of the greatest challenges for me is to understand that everybody can't be the friend that I want them to be to me, that I want to be to them.
Yeah.
And that during some of the past few years of having some health challenges and stuff, it gives you time to reflect and to sit back and just reevaluate relationships and those types of things. I think I'm always reflecting and evaluating all the time, and not necessarily to be disparaging toward anyone else, but to figure out how to become even the better version of who I really want to be and who I believe God has put me on earth to be. So that's good. If there was a shortcoming of using human design, what do you think that would be?
Some people use it as a crutch. I'll give you an example. So for projectors, their strategy is to wait for the invitation. But that's especially applicable to four major areas. So friendships, like intimate relationships, career, and if you're about to move. So those are the four big ones that you should really listen to your strategy and your authority on how you make those decisions. But for some people, they'll see that they're a projector, they'll read that they're supposed to just kind of wait for things to come to them. And they think that means that they just don't have to do anything. They don't have to master their craft. They don't have to like be on this continual learning cycle. And it's like, no, it depending on what source you get your information from, it actually says take care of you, do the things that light you up, and in doing that things will come to you. It doesn't say just do nothing and sit around and watch Netflix all day.
That is an interesting, because I think sometimes in the faith realm, there are some things that you must do. If you do this, then this should happen. If you believe in abundance, you can't go outside and wait for money to fall from a tree. You're going to have to do something to help make that manifest. And I think that you're absolutely correct that people could see that and then misinterpret what that means. And then they wonder, like, well, I guess I must not be that, or that must not be who I really am because nothing's happened. No, nothing's happened because you did nothing. Your desire to work with women. We haven't talked about that, and I want to, because that's a big part of who you are and what you do. And one of the things that had you interested in being on the podcast is our work and some of the women that we've spoken with. Why do you do that?
As I said, my trial showed me just how much our hormones as women affects us. We have these four phases. Like everyone talks about menstruation because we all know like you're a different person when you're on your period.
Mhm.
But people don't talk about how you are during the follicular phase or during ovulation or during the luteal phase. Like each of these phases has different things that it needs. Like some phases you need more protein. Some phases you can fast all day and be fine. And so when people try to create, or women specifically, try to create these routines or try to follow these diets, and then they wonder why they're tired all the time, why they're not as productive as they could be. I believe that human design, it gives you a way to see how you're supposed to use your energy. When you understand your body more, so understanding the cycles that your body goes through as a woman and how to navigate each one, it only helps. So that's why I feel so called, because so many women, they are in these patterns that they don't even realize they're in. And when there's a book, I forget what it's called now, but it's all about the fertility awareness method. And so it involves like taking your temperature and checking your cervical mucus and all of that stuff. And many times, because it's associated often with the rhythm method, people will think like, oh, I'm single, so I don't have to do that. You're single, so you don't have to pay attention to your body and the things that it needs? Absolutely not. That's why I following the ups and downs and the flows of my cycle, in addition to the tools that I use, has helped me tremendously. I don't fight myself anymore. I go with it.
You mentioned the word energy a lot, and that's such a buzzword. And everything is energy. Money is energy. Your energy. What does that really mean to someone that's listening?
In quantum physics, it's said that we're all vibrations. It's one of those things that science has tried to look at closely. So for me, energy it's almost synonymous with the spirit.
Mm.
I explain this to my daughter because she is a manifesting generator. So she has a lot of energy. And so she doesn't really like to sit still. That's a kid thing, but especially for a manifesting generator child. And so I was explaining to her that think of it as we were these stars, this energy in the sky. And in spirituality and human design, like there's a fifth dimension where everything's interconnected. And so it's believed that we chose to incarnate as human beings so that we could experience ourselves as individuals, so that we could really, this is I am, like, and actually be able to be like 3D, like this is me. And again, going back to the mind, body, spirit, we have a mind. It talks a lot. It thinks a lot. It says a bunch of things, and not all of them are positive. We have this body, which through the work that I do with the up and down cycles, but your spirit is there. It's inside of you. You can feel it when you meditate and you silence the mind and you connect with whatever your version of I am is, your inner divine. That's the energy that you're tapping into, the
Okay.
creative God power.
I wrote down here as you were talking, inner spirit, inner strength and inner authority. What role does believing in a creator or a higher power have in you understanding what you call the spirit that's in you? Because I understand and believe that God creates everything and then it gives you his spirit as part of how you live. What is the role of believing in something bigger than yourself in human design?
I think it only helps. I did meet someone who said that they identified as like atheist or agnostic or something, and they discovered human design and it made them understand that there's something bigger. Like when we understand the planetary influences and everything and how the human design is a synthesis of these different sciences, it's like, okay, there's something here. Because you can't, when you pull your chart and you have the information right, like you said, it just confirms what you already know. It doesn't tell you anything new. It's just like, oh, that's why this is happening. Intriguing. Good to know. And so when you believe in something bigger than yourself, it only helps. I'm in a law of attraction group that meets every Thursday morning. And so one of the things that she says all the time is that we have the God power within us. And they oftentimes will quote scripture. And the thing that I understand from my time in that group is that oftentimes we see the Bible, we see the stories in the Bible, and we're like, those are just stories. They don't actually believe that we as beings in this lifetime can create those things for ourselves. But actually, it's through that group that I even started saying things like this God power within us, because as it says in scripture, God is in you. God is love. He is all around. So when you already believe that God is in you, and then you have a way to tap into the power and manifest things that you didn't think were possible because your mind and society told you didn't, like, it only helps if you believe in something bigger than what you.
The universe is subject to the laws of God. And because the universe has to respond to laws that are in place, but those laws have to come from somewhere. And so that's why I don't worship the universe. I worship God, but the universe must respond to the laws that are in place that I can activate. And that really makes things move forward. I know some astrologers and some people that actually study the universe and the galaxies. And I tell people Jesus had a star and the wise men had to watch it to find where he was. And Harriet Tubman, thank God, knew where the North Star was, or else slaves would not have been free. And we used the sundial and to tell time. And many of the festivals in the Jewish faith in the Old Testament were based on new moons and different types of moons and stuff. So there must be some understanding that we need to have of that which God created. You've been really good. Let's do our closing questions that we ask everyone. Okay. I'm going to give you 3 words, one at a time. Each one, I want you to just tell the audience what comes to mind. And that first word is perspective.
That is all in the mind. You have complete control over it. It's a choice that you make. You can either look at something as being the worst thing in the world, or you can, as we said earlier, choose to see the good and believe that instead.
Perseverance.
Ooh, it's the will to fight and endure, because you know that whatever is on the other side of whatever it is you're persevering through is better than your current circumstances. So you push and you thrive.
Partnerships.
Partnerships, for me, we experience ourselves as individuals, but we still need community. We can't do everything all by ourselves all the time. We need strategic partnerships to help us fulfill the work that we were put here to do in this lifetime.
I'm going to give you the last word with our audience. Let's just say this is the last thing you had to say on earth. What would you tell our audience?
Limit does not exist, but fear and self-doubt will make you believe that it does. And it is those beliefs that actually hold you back from creating whatever is possible for you.
Wow. Diamond, this has been great. If people want to follow you, perhaps get their chart and dig deeper than we did today, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yes, on my website, diamonddripconsulting.com. You don't have to scroll far for your free human design chart. So I encourage everyone who listens to this to help me fulfill my vision statement. I am trying to help 1 million souls over the next 5 years wake up to who they truly are, not who they were conditioned to believe that they are.
Well, that's a great mission, and you'll reach that. You'll be able to reach that and probably beyond. So, well, this is David Cooks. First of all, thanking you, Diamond, for being on our podcast today. And thank you so much for your support and sharing it with others, because I know it means a lot to me as well. So this is David Cooks reminding you, until next time on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, that your ability to endure is always greater than your willingness to endure.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thanks for tuning in to Paralysis to Purpose. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paralysis to Purpose on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To purchase his book, visit davidcookspeaks.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with David Cooks.
But the other part of it, as a leader, if your team can function well without your presence, you've done a good job building your team. If they can't, then you as a leader have created a dependency which handicaps your team.
Next time on Paralysis to Purpose.
And that's hard for a lot of leaders to get their head around, because they believe that dependency is an indicator of my value. But your greatest value is to build a team that can function well without you. And when you're there, you're enhancing them, you're providing direction, you're providing mentoring and those things, but they don't have to have you there to perform.
Paralysis to purpose.